a lot has happened since the last time we came to you from the CBU Central podcast. Supposed to record our ACC preview last week, just didn't happen for a number of reasons, given how busy both of our lives kind of got. But Brad, I come to you officially blocked by John Rothstein. This is a new podcast. I'm determined to use that as motivation to become the best podcaster I can be. I got 150 likes for tweeting that I got blocked by John. Any life updates for you while we were gone from the pod?
Not really. I can't really condemn Rothstein for not tweeting about the trial. That was everyone's big kind of sticking point with him, because I don't think I tweeted about the trial, because I just thought, it's going to be a blip, as Coach K said. I didn't think anyone was going to be convicted. I thought it was just going to be a more smoke and mirrors, like with the first round of the Sean Miller stuff last February. Everyone said he's going to get fired, and he missed like one game. Every kind of step of this way, they've been promising these big bombshells, have not delivered. And I guess this is the biggest bombshell so far. It's not even college basketball related, though. It's 3 Adidas guys going to jail.
Yeah, I mean, I was thoroughly floored that a prosecutor was able to get a conviction on the grounds that that basketball teams were defrauded by being given top recruits because they were paid. I mean, that was some incredible logic, but I guess it just kind of demonstrates the divide between those who know about the sport and those who don't. And I mean, I think if I explained it to one of my friends, they would probably have a little bit of tough time seeing the logic, but one of my non-sports fan friends, if you will, I think they would have a little bit of a tough time seeing the logic of the conviction, but I think they could have been convinced with the right evidence that those people did commit a crime by the letter of the law. And so that's what happened. I mean, any other thoughts from you on these convictions that I think we were all kind of surprised to see? I know the people I speak to are close to the thing were very surprised.
Yeah, so I think the logic that I saw of why the jury voted to convict, it wasn't totally unreasonable, but if you know like anything about like college athletics, it's absurd. But on the surface, I saw that the logic was that these players were getting money, and if Kansas didn't know about it, then they wouldn't offer them a scholarship to these kids who are rich with all this under the table money. But it doesn't matter how much money that Mr. Williamson had. It doesn't matter if Mr. Williamson was the president of Microsoft. I mean, if his kid's the number 2 recruit in the country, he's going to get a full ride to play wherever he wants. They don't care how much money that his dad has. But I think from an outside perspective, they might look at it, because I think a lot of people are against college athletes getting paid because they had to pay a lot of student loans themselves, and they think, well, like, my life would have been so much better if I just had to go to college for free. They don't really conceptualize how much value that these athletes are adding to the schools, specifically basketball players. But I think that they use kind of the same sort of logic, where why would these kids get free educations when they had so much money that could have been used to pay for the education?
Yeah, and I also think the one thing that maybe is also in there is the schools are being defrauded because they would never offer a scholarship to someone who had violated NCAA rules that would like open them up to a scandal, basically. I think that was a big part of the argument, not just the idea that, oh, you're giving the scholarships to people who wouldn't necessarily need it. It's more about you're giving a scholarship to someone who would cause you to get in trouble with the NCAA. And I thought the most interesting thing, and Dan Wetzel tweeted, I talked to some people who are close to the case, and they agreed with the premise, and that was basically that this statement, the jury finds amateurism acceptable and says the NCAA is kind of justified in what they're doing, and that had they not convicted, they could have made the case that you could make the case that the jury was making a statement in favor of ending amateurism in college athletics. And certainly the conviction state makes a statement that's still going to stick around for quite some time.
And yeah, I think that there is some truth to the fact that a program wouldn't give, just any recruit, any normal recruit who might have NCAA issues, whether it be academic or taking, improper benefits. Like you see guys in like the back half of the top 100 all the time, like an Alonzo Verge or like an LJ Figueroa. Figueroa was a top 100 recruit. He's probably not going to qualify because of academics, right? So he goes to New Mexico State, right, where New Mexico State is not getting a top 100 recruit on normal circumstances. Alonzo Verge, top 100 guy, doesn't sign anywhere, has to go to JUCO. So for like a 50 to 100 recruit, clearly no one wanted to even let the kid sit out a year, right? Because I know like Providence with Ricky Lito, everyone knew he was probably going to have to sit out the year, but he's top 10 recruit. They hope he can get him for that second year, and in that sit out year being worth it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Kind of whole interactions of whether a guy's eligible or not, how that impacts how players are going to get compensated, whether coaches would give them scholarships. I mean, I think there's a case to be made that they should be found guilty, and I don't think there's any doubt that the letter of the law states they should be. I just think the idea that the government is tracking down this type of thing when that's the premise the entire time is just beyond dumb. I know it kind of came to them because I think it was Gasnola was the guy who that really started the case. Was he wasn't paying taxes or whatever, and that kind of hinted everything off. Or there was some sort of illegal activity that he was doing that caused a chain of events that led to Bowen's recruitment being uncovered, and from there more and more stuff with Christian Dawkins and Merle Coe, Jim Gatto, and many others. So, I mean, it really is fascinating how it all came together. I disagree with the premise of criminality with that, but this is not a legal podcast. This is a basketball podcast. So I think from the basketball perspective, we pretty much covered the impacts of it.
Yep, and then we just want to touch on a couple big injuries. Jonte Porter out for Missouri, torn ACL and MCL. Good night, Missouri. Down to the bottom of the SEC for them. And then Eric Curry out 4 to 6 weeks for Minnesota. Obviously not as big of a deal, but he was going to be the starting center coming off an injury last season where he missed the entire year. He was going to be a key piece. Hopefully he comes back 100% healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to touch on Jonte specifically, and your heart breaks for the kid, first of all, because of how good he is. And I mean, this is a chance to cost him millions of dollars when he could have been a first-round pick last year. He instead goes back to school. Now he's going to have a bum leg potentially. I mean, you just hate to see it from that perspective. I mean, for Jonte, I mean, for Missouri, it's incredibly frustrating because not only do I think you had a chance with Jonte, even with the bad backcourt, but Mark Smith just got a waiver, and it wouldn't surprise me if Drew Smith gets one too. I mean, given Mark Smith, I don't understand Mark Smith's case, given that he was close to home when he was playing in Illinois. So it's not like a simple hardship waiver of I need to come closer to home. So, from that perspective, I mean, the fact that he gets a waiver, it implies to me that perhaps Drew Smith would have gotten one too, and all of a sudden this team's in business. I mean, a Drew Smith, Mark Smith, Jonte Porter, Jeremiah Tillman, Kevin Puryear, even a guy like Jordan Geist, KJ Santos. I mean, I think that's a tournament team. If Mark Smith can be anything close to what he was billed as a recruit. So, I mean, for that kind of a turn of events to occur is certainly frustrating. I think it'll be fascinating to see how Smith's used. It'll be fascinating to see Jeremiah Tillman. But yeah, this team has no shot now.
Yeah, and everyone was talking about how this G League contract thing is going to hurt college basketball so much. That's not going to hurt college basketball as much as this waiver process, because what it's indirectly doing is it's almost eliminating the fifth-year senior, which is like a very like they're older, they're more experienced, and usually they're some of the best players in college basketball, usually starters on their teams. So by allowing waivers and guys aren't sitting out that year, they're a year worse, essentially. And having those younger players is I think going to hurt the sport more than just losing the top 3 or 4 guys to the G League.
That's an interesting point that I hadn't really thought of. I mean, I think the waiver in some ways is good for college basketball. I mean, you're almost getting a taste of immediate eligibility. I think it's interesting. I think it's the one thing I will say regarding that is like, unless like no one's going to transfer and just assume they're getting a waiver unless they know they're going to go close to home. Like Mustafa Heron was always going to get a waiver. I don't know why St. John's fans were so concerned. Like Mustafa Heron had an open and shut, you deserve a waiver case. But like for the most part, a lot of these waivers have been kind of questionable. If you were to open it up and say transfers are all eligible to play right away, would more players transfer than guys who are like transferring and then being, well, I guess I'll put my name in the hat for a waiver because everyone's getting them? And like, how would that affect transfer numbers? I think that'll be interesting kind of counter argument of like whether the waiver is like actually just like preventing the NCAA from getting sued, which is kind of the thought process. But I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, the 5th year point you made, I hadn't even thought of. So definitely something I'll be monitoring as well, because there will be less 5th year guys. Although there used to be 5th year guys because of most 5th year guys weren't because of transfer, they were because of injury, and now it's because of transfer. So maybe it'll just go back to guys like a Perry Ellis, or I think Perry Ellis was a 5th year senior, right?
I think he was just 4.
That's just not possible, Brad. He had to have played 5 years.
I was thinking earlier because I saw the Rothstein tweet about Nate Lazuski is similar to Tim Abromaitis. And Notre Dame had 2 6th-year guys. They had Scott Martin, who was like a glue guy wing, and Abromaitis has like a stretch 4. They might have been like 1 year apart. Like I think Abromaitis' 6th year might have been Martin's 5th year or something. But that just got me thinking about these 24, 25-year-old college basketball players.
Yeah, definitely crazy. Anything else just around college basketball before we get into the ACC? It's a loaded podcast whenever we talk about a 15-team league. So definitely want to give us as much time to do that as we can.
No, let's jump in.
All right, let's jump in. We're going to start it off with the team that came in last season. That would be Virginia, and we will just go through the standings like they were in 2016-17. Or 2017-18, excuse me. I'm like really off my game today. I apologize. Virginia came in first in the ACC last year, went 17-1 in conference, 31-3 overall. And the core of this team, the nucleus, is back. Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter. They do lose Devin Hall. They do lose Isaiah Wilkins, 2 key departures. But they add Braxton Key from Bama, who was a legit all-conference trajectory player as a freshman before having injury trouble as a sophomore for the Crimson Tide. This team's going to be very versatile and switch. They can switch 1 through 4, except for Guy. I mean, Ty Jerome can probably guard 3s, even though at 6'5" point guard. I mean, Hunter can guard 1 through 4. Braxton Key can guard 1 through 4, even 1 through 5. I mean, this defense is just going to be so good with the pack line, as it always is. I mean, to me, it's the top 5 team in the country. I don't really think there's that much debate about it in my book, even though Devin Hall was so important to that team as well as Wilkins.
I actually have Virginia top 2 right now after getting Braxton Key eligible. I think that they could, you could also make a case for them to be number 1. Before Key got the waiver, I thought, the kind of biggest weakness on this team was their perimeter depth. It seems like they were kind of missing a piece, but now you can slide Hunter down to the 4 or Key can play the 4 too. It's kind of semantics between the two. But have those 2 plus these 2 dynamic guards in Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy. I think that Ty Jerome is one of the more underappreciated players in the entire country because he hasn't put up a lot of stats, but I think saying he's steady would not do him justice. I think he's a really good player who could be a kind of a sneaky All-American pick depending on how well Virginia does and if he's deemed their best player. But then, I mean, their front court depth is also exceptional, but they have 4 guys who have all generated a fair amount of buzz, who can play that center position between, I mean, Salt is probably going to start because he started the past few years. He's a senior. Giacchidi has played a lot. He's a very athletic big man. And then Jay Huff, a lot of hype surrounding him. Redshirt as a freshman, barely played last year, but I mean, he's a former top 50 recruit. He's someone to keep an eye on. And then Francisco Cafaro, the Argentinian, I believe, center, who played extremely well in the U18 tournament this summer.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they do try to go small at all. I mean, and play like a Key at the 5 and then add an extra guard. I mean, they would just be impossible to guard. I mean, it doesn't really fit the MO. For Virginia, I think you want that guy like Salt who will just set some screens, rebound, be tough. But, I mean, you could give away a little bit on defense from a man-to-man perspective in order to get another like score on the floor, like a scoring point guard like Kihei Clark, who's diminutive. Let Ty Jerome score a little more and let Clark run the show. I mean, it just gives you a lot more options to have a guy like he who can play multiple positions, who's athletic, who can space the floor a little bit. I mean, he's such a valuable piece for this team. And DeAndre Hunter, we haven't really touched on, is just like probably going to be a top 15 pick in the draft. Can shoot the ball, can take you off the bounce, and is like the main reason in my mind why Virginia lost that game to UMBC.
Yeah, I mean, regarding that game, I think they just got down early and then they got tight, and their style isn't really conducive to coming back, and they just kind of collapsed there. I mean, Hunter's obviously, one of the best NBA draft prospects in the country. He fits this kind of new emphasis on these, kind of multi-positional wings who can defend and are athletic. And, with him and Braxton Key, can also create, and he's like not necessarily a point forward, but he's a good playmaker. He'll fit that Virginia style extremely well. And, this is going to be a very, very good team that should hopefully, put an end to the Virginia lost to a 16 seed nonsense that I see every single day.
I wonder who is doing that.
I don't even know. Could it be mid-major madness, and could it be college basketball Reddit? Every single day I see something like that.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, Virginia's going to be really good. I don't know that there's that much more to say on it. Let's move on to Duke. Duke went 13-5 in the conference last year. They had a few stumbles as they kind of worked out playing all freshmen except for Grayson Allen, and then they were good down the stretch, and then lost the NCAA tournament earlier than was expected. But this team is going to be really talented again. I mean, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish, Zion Williamson, so versatile, so athletic. I mean, obviously, about Zion Williamson. If you listen to this podcast, about RJ Barrett, about Cam Reddish. And then Trey Jones will run the show. I guess the biggest question just from a rotational standpoint, Brad, is how you round that out. I think you go with Javin DeLaurier. You hope that he can provide all those glue guy tendencies at the 5. And you hope that you can space the floor enough with Zion playing the 4. You hope that he can shoot the ball enough that the teams don't collapse and just force you and just force you to make threes. I mean, I'm way down on Marcus Bolden. Like, I'm just way off the bandwagon, like, so far that it's not even funny. I would love to see a few minutes of Alex O'Connell with Zion on the floor with Zion at the 5, just spacing and go 5 out and just run. I think the strength of this team is just going to be go, 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 grab and go, and get out and run with RJ, get out and run with Zion on rebounds. I think that's their best offense. It's just those dudes in the open floor.
Yeah, I completely agree. With all the athleticism and versatility, and all these guys, Barrett, Reddish, Williamson, can all handle the ball. That should make Duke extremely dynamic offensively. And Williamson was one of the bigger surprises for me watching them this summer, where he was so shifty with the ball in his hands, able to change direction, extremely quickly off the dribble, and obviously is super athletic. And then I completely agree with you that Javin DeLaurier should be that 5-man. I mean, he doesn't need the ball. He goes out there, he plays hard, he rebounds, he defends. It just seems like a perfect fit there. And then coming off the bench, it looks like Jack White and Alex O'Connell, probably the 2 most used bench players. Both will provide some outside shooting. O'Connell missed that summer trip, I think, with a broken orbital bone, and then White played okay. Probably needs to hit more shots to really be effective. But I think he fits well as a spot-up shooter around these guys.
Yeah, and I talked a little bit with Adam Comero, who is running a podcast now about the ACC, does a lot with Duke. And he was mentioning the idea of Jack White being the 5th guy in like a death lineup, where like Zion's the 5 technically and Jack White spaces the floor, but to give him a little more size so RJ doesn't have to play the 4 or Cam Reddish. I thought that was like an interesting proposal where Jack White is a good enough shooter where that can work. He's been playing a lot in like their exhibitions and stuff. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, why not just go with Alex O'Connell? I mean, O'Connell's a better shooter. I mean, he can't guard fours, but Reddish and Barrett are probably gonna have to play some four in the NBA. They can. They're certainly big enough to do it. And I don't know how many kind of like physical banging fours that there really are. I mean, just looking quickly, Louisville, Syracuse, UNC, all probably gonna have more of skilled four men, like more wings. So that's not a bad matchup. We just mentioned Virginia with Braxton Key and DeAndre Hunter. I'm not sure any of these teams really have a bruising type of four-man because Phil Kofer spaces the floor. Jalen Horde is a wing for Wake Forest. I mean, I don't think any of these teams have a real like a traditional four-man.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I mean, I do think there is a tendency with guys like Coach K, with some of these older coaches, to go bigger rather than smaller, and feel the need to have bigs on the floor. So, I mean, you might see that even though it's illogical, but I mean, we'll see. I do tend to agree with your logic. I do think. I mean, how do you feel about R.J. Barrett? I guess, do you think R.J. Barrett is more equipped to guard O'Shea Brissett or Phil Kofer than Jack White is?
Yes.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I was just interested. I think coaches might think otherwise, but I would agree.
I think the real question would be: do you think Alex O'Connell is more equipped to guard Tyus Battle than R.J. Barrett or Terrence Mann?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, what Coach K does with those rotations will be absolutely fascinating. Let's move it on to Clemson and.
We'll just first, if I could just mention,
sure,
the composite with Virginia came in. Obviously, this was before the waiver news for Key. Duke came in fourth. And in terms of highs and lows, the lowest person for Virginia. That's Virginia Tech. That's why it made more sense. I was like, what? Someone has them at 25. That is Virginia Tech Hokies. Lowest for Virginia is 9, which was not crazy before the waiver news. And lowest for Duke is 9 as well. And that person who has Duke 9th is Aaron Torres.
Wow. Floored I am that Aaron Torres has a hot take in his rankings. Let's go on to Clemson. 25-10 last year, saving Brad Brownell's job. They miss on Zion Williamson, but in the future, still bright, at least for this year. Marquise Reed back for one more go at it. Same with Shelton Mitchell and Elijah Thomas. They didn't really miss a beat after losing Dante Grantham, which was huge. I think everybody thought when Grantham went down, this team would kind of fall apart. And Brad Brownell coming together, and they weren't great after that moment, but they were just good enough to hang around. And they actually gave Kansas a game in the Sweet 16. It was very impressive to see what Brownell did with this group. I'm really excited about Amir Sims. I think he's going to be really good this year for this Clemson team. He was in double figures in their exhibition against UNC Wilmington. They won 78-67 per Jeff Goodman, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm a little down on this team in terms of, I think there's going to be a little regression from like third in the conference to like 6th or 7th. But last year, I mean, there was 4 teams tied for third. So, I mean, it doesn't take much to go from 3rd to 7th in this league. I think they probably drop more into that middle tier than the top tier. But I mean, his team was really good last year. And we have to give Brad Brownell credit after, the amount of criticism he earned over the past several seasons.
I think it's very notable to point out that this Clemson team, the team that saved Brownell's job and kind of rebuilt the program, it was built on transfers. I mean, Sheldon Mitchell started at Vanderbilt. Marcus Reed started at Robert Morris. Elijah Thomas started at Texas A&M. And then even David Scarra, who started a lot of games once Dante Grantham was out at that power forward position, started at Valpo. This is a perfect example of, Clemson's at a recruiting disadvantage, being so close to so many powerful basketball programs like in the Carolinas and the Southeast, but they went about it a different way, and they accumulated enough talent to make a Sweet 16. And for this year, I don't think that they will be as good as they were last year. This team feels a little blah to me. It feels like this is kind of like a team that you should rank between 20 and 25. Not super exciting, but they really need some of these guys who were role players previously to step forward, especially at at the shooting guard position and fill in for Gabe DeVoe, like maybe a Clyde Trapp or an AJ Oliver.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with pretty much everything you said there. I feel like they might be just missing one or two pieces, and I think that's enough to make the NCAA tournament again. I don't know that it's enough for them to be where they were last year.
Completely agree there. I have them, I think, at 23, which puts them as like a 6 seed, I believe. Not very hot takes regarding Clemson in the rankings. A few people have them 17th, which is not even that high, really. A couple people have them there, and then a few people have them unranked, but most people have them in that 20 to 25 range.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably have them right outside my top 25, but I mean, we've discussed this many times. We think there's like a pretty clear, like, top 18 to 20, and then after that, you could put pretty much anyone in there for the next 20 to 40. It's very tight. So I think they slide in somewhere in that range.
Absolutely. So who's next here in the ACC?
We'll do, since we're going alphabetically. Of the teams who are tied at 11 and 7, Miami is next. Also, we'll do the Hurricanes. They're projected probably in that 9 to 11 range by most people this year in the conference. They lose Lonnie Walker. They lose Jaquan Newton. They lose Bruce Brown, who was hurt last season. But Chris Likes is back. Dajuan Huel. Now Dajuan Hernandez, I believe he's changed his name to. They still have Vasiljevic, and they add guys like Zach Johnson, Anthony Mack as transfers who will play right away. My biggest concern just with this team, Brad, is you're going to start a backcourt that is Chris Likes, 5'7", Dejan Vasiljevic, who is 6'3" and doesn't play a lick of defense, and either a 6'2" Zach Johnson, who is a great defender, or you're going bigger with Anthony Lawrence at the 3, which I wouldn't do. You could play Anthony Mack, who's an unproven D1 player. The guard defense is going to be real bad. Like, they're going to be small. And Chris Likes and Dejan Vasiljevic, you can't hide both. You can hide one. You can't hide both.
Yeah, it seems like all the computer rankings are very high on Miami. I think, they all have Miami top 25, and I don't really understand what about this team would be so appealing to that algorithm. I mean, that they lose, their two best players in Lonnie Walker and Bruce Brown. They don't have a lot of returners, or at least returning players who played prominent roles. I mean, Lawrence is fine, but he's a role player. He's a good 4th or 5th starter. Zach Johnson, coming from the Atlantic Sun, maybe he has an adjustment period, but I think he'll be a solid starting 2 guard. I think Likes will be fine at point guard, but the perimeter depth is certainly lacking. If they didn't get Anthony Mack's waiver, I mean, they were in a world of hurt in terms of perimeter depth, and the roster doesn't really seem to fit all that well. I think that also kind of speaks to the perimeter depth, and I have Miami as kind of like a 4 or 5 seed in the NIT.
Yeah, I think they could compete for a bit. I wouldn't bet on it preseason. I can't wait to watch Chris Likes. Like, he's just super fun at 5'7", and he just goes out and gets buckets. And I think Dajuan Hernandez is going to be a terrific player this season. Like, he was really good last year, 11-6, 11-7. You can see him being like a 14-8, 14-9 guy this year. But the guard, I think Zach Johnson is good. I just don't love the overall team depth. I don't love the backcourt defense, as I mentioned. I think this is probably an NIT team.
Yeah, I mean, if Lonnie Walker came back, maybe now we're talking like if he was like their best player, start at that 3 spot, move Vasiljevic off the bench. But with either Chris Likes or Dajuan Hernandez as your best player, I mean, Hernandez is a great role man in the pick and roll, but he's not someone that you want to give like ISO post ups or like have him trying to create a lot of offense. So I think that this Miami team is probably a year away. They get Cam McGusty next season. Unless he gets another one of these crazy waivers. But they'll be better next year.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, it wouldn't stun me if they made the tournament. I have 9th, but I wouldn't bet on it. Let's move it on to North Carolina. I'm assuming no one has Miami in the closet.
No,
other than the computer rankings.
In terms of where I have them in the ACC, I actually have them 11th.
I think 9 through 11 is really close. Louisville, Miami, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
North Carolina, 26 wins last season. It was kind of a weird season. They competed for a 1 seed till the very end, despite having a ton of losses. And now they'll lose Joel Berry from that team. They'll lose Theo Pinson. So both of their initiators of offense. So that's a pretty big concern for me. But I'm really excited about how this team looks. I mean, they can go 5 out with Luke May at the 5 and go Kenny Williams and Kobe White and Cam Johnson and Naz Little, who's one of the top 5 recruits in the country. Or they can go big, throw Garrison Brooks or Sterling Manley at you at the 5 with May at the 4. May's a double guys with that rebounding of one of those lineups would be absurd. I think they've got pretty solid depth with guys like Andrew Platek, who I think can be a useful rotation player. I think it's really just about Kobe White. Can he play point guard for this team? And I think he can. I mean, and if he can, I think this is clearly a top 10 team, maybe a top 5 team.
Yeah, I completely agree. UNC was playing great down the stretch last year. Obviously until they got blown out by Texas A&M in the round of 32. I had them, I believe, playing in the national championship. Obviously, there was a little lofty expectations there, but this is for this season. They are, I think, without a doubt, the best 3-point shooting team in the country, especially when they play May at that 5 spot. Luke May takes a lot of unwarranted flack because he's not very flashy. I mean, he's a jump shooter. He's like a pick and pop player, and that's not typically a guy that's like the best player in the country. Like, he doesn't do a lot of ball handling or anything like that. But I think that there is a legitimate argument that he could be at least a top 5 player in terms of a college player in the country. And just Kobe White, he was super impressive this summer at U18. Didn't play any, he played very little point guard on the U18 team. He's definitely a score first type of guy, but he's a excellent player.
Yeah, and that's the concern is you're playing a point guard as your quote unquote lead guard, and he's not necessarily a true point guard. And how does that kind of work out in terms of an offense where you're going to have all this shooting, all this spacing? You want to be about ball movement all the time, and is that ball movement going to be hindered by playing a guy like Kobe White at point guard? They don't really have any other good options. I think you'll definitely try for it, and it's just a matter of whether it will hinder their ceiling a little bit. I think this team is going to be really good, though.
Yeah. Seventh Woods, who's the other point guard, he certainly is not, a main distributor type. And I think just the one other guy who's going to come off the bench, I think is going to make a really big impact is Sterling Manley. He showed a ton of flashes last year. He's a very, very, very high upside, kind of skilled, low post big man. Might not have the greatest pro prospects because of the kind of transitioning style, but he's going to be an excellent college player for the remainder of his UNC career. And then UNC comes in at 8th in the composite.
Yeah, I think that's about right for them. And I have them third in the ACC, just behind Duke and Virginia. Virginia 1, Duke 2. Although I wouldn't be surprised if – I mean, I think that's a pretty clear tier 1 to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. No real hot takes in terms of UNC's placement. The Buzz King has them at 4th, which is the highest. I don't think that's unreasonable. And then they do come in at number 12 by Blue Ribbon. I think that's a touch low, but really nothing too outlandish there. You can make an argument for 12.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's keep it moving to North Carolina State, the Wolfpack. It's kind of a interesting year for Kevin Keatts because last year was seen as this transition year while they get everybody eligible who was sitting out. But, I mean, Al Freeman was so important as a grad transfer. Omar Yurtseven transfers. Leonard Freeman played a good amount of minutes. Even like Sam Hunt and Malika Boo, who rounded out the rotation. I mean, it doesn't feel like we add a bunch to a team that just brings everybody back like you were expecting. But I'm still really excited to watch this team because they're just going to be so versatile and they can just run bodies at you at guard, whether it's Markel Johnson, who I think might be the most underrated point guard in the country, whether it's Braxton Beverly, whether it's CJ Bryce, who can handle the ball. Devin Daniels from Utah will play on the wing for them. I mean, Torrin Dorn's still around, which is crazy to me. I don't know how he's still in college, but he is. And then Eric Lockett, who's a grad transfer. I think the only real question, and even Blake Harris coming in from Mizzou. I mean, the only real question here is just the front court. I think basically the big man spot, they're going to play 4 guards of some sort. And then it's just the big man's either going to be Wyatt Walker, who's like a big floor spacer, not really going to protect the rim, but rebounds the ball pretty well. Grad transfer from Samford. He's a 2-year guy. And then Derek Funderburk, who was a JUCO guy originally at Ohio State, extremely athletic. I think he's the best fit to just get up and down and throw lobs to. I mean, this team's going to be fun. Like, this would be like a league pass college basketball team if there was such a thing.
I agree 100%. I have NC State 16th in my rankings, which I think is the highest that I've seen them. They're going to get back to playing Kevin Keats' style of play from UNC Wilmington. A lot of wings who can handle and create play four perimeter players around one center, and I think that I completely agree with you that Derek Funderburk is going to be that guy. Top 5 JUCO player, former top 60 recruit. I think he fits really well with Daniels, Dorn, and Bryce, and then Markel Johnson at the point. And in terms of Wyatt Walker, I think he's probably the backup this year. I think he probably plays maybe 15 minutes a game. Then I think, kind of anecdotally, I think that Walker could be the next in the line of like these Cullen Neal and Maudo Sala as like the double grad transfer. Or I think that, with Sasha Killier-Jones becoming eligible after this year, I think we could see him make a move and be one of these rare double grad transfers.
Certainly would not surprise me. I think that's a very good point. I mean, I guess for this team, like, are they – I think the big question for me, like, are they going to rebound? I mean, they won the rebounding battle last year. Overall, they lost it by a little bit in conference play, but it wasn't egregious. They're going to win the turnover battle. It's just can they, not give away a lot of extra possessions? They'll be small. I guess I think the saving grace is they have a lot of good rebounding guards, guys like Lockett, guys like Devon Daniels, guys like Bryce, who rebounded the ball well. I think that's huge, because if not, I mean, you could start thinking about this team getting mauled on the glass and, maybe hindering their upside. But I mean, if Funderburk can take over that job and be really good, I mean, this team is where you have them nationally. If not, I think this is more of a bubble team. I come in kind of somewhere in the middle.
If so, in terms of the composite, they're obviously outside the top 25. I have them 4 spots higher than anybody else. I have them at 16. Then Barstool Reeves has them at 20, as well as Joe Nardone. I'm just very high on these transfers coming in, especially Devin Daniels, who averaged nearly 10 points a game as a freshman on a pretty good Utah team. I believe was NIT, if I'm not mistaken. Then CJ Bryce, who obviously has a lot of familiarity playing with Coach Keats, playing that small ball 4 spot. I think the 2 of those guys are more of difference makers than they're being credit for. That they're being given credit for. And then you mentioned this earlier, but Markel Johnson, super underrated. Even a guy like Braxton Beverly, who got most of his attention because of his kind of very unique situation where they fired Thad Matta after summer school started, and he had to get this waiver. But I mean, he was very good last year. He is injured to start the year, but he's going to play. He's going to be a contributor. He's going to shoot the ball and give them a nice combo guard to kind of fit in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're just so deep, 1 through 3, and then you're just going to play 3s at the 4, basically.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens there. I mean, it's gonna be a fun team to watch. I have an 8th in the ACC when I did my preview. I feel like that's too low. I think I might move down Florida State, move them up to 7th, or move up NC State to 7th or 6th, because I'm starting to get like bad vibes about this FSU club. Especially with the Kofor injury, and we'll get to those guys in a minute. But I mean, they're going to be fun. Like, we know that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have them 6th as well, which kind of speaks to how strong that top half of the ACC is. Those top 8 teams are probably all at least in the mix for the top 25. But those could be the only eight teams that that make the field. So there is kind of that huge gap between, for me, Clemson at 8 and Notre Dame at 9.
Yeah, I would agree. Those are where the kind of the distinctions lie. Let's move on to a team I'm pretty high on, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech brings a lot back from a team that was pretty good last season. Justin Robinson, one of the better point guards in the country. Kerry Blackshear, a very solid big man. Nikhil Alexander Walker has all the draft buzz going forward as kind of that 3-and-D wing who can score the ball. Still have guys like Ahmed Hill, Chris Clark. And then they get back Ty Outlaw, who averaged 14 and 7 while shooting 64% from 3 over his final 8 games of 2016-17. Then got hurt last year and missed the season. I mean, he's super valuable, kind of multi-positional combo forward. Buzz Williams can really coach. I mean, I have the team fourth in the ACC. I think they're the best of the rest behind that Duke, Carolina, Virginia group.
I have them fifth. I have them behind Florida State, a team that I am really high on Florida State. The Phil Kofer injury is giving me a lot of pause, but for now, I'm keeping that 4-5 as it is with the Hokies at number 5. But I'm also very intrigued by this team. They have a very I'll say they have a great college point guard in Justin Robinson. Maybe he can get like a second round flyer, like a summer league flyer, but he is a very good point guard. And then Chris Clark is one of my favorite players as like a kind of a energy kind of glue guy, super athletic four-man that can also create and post some pretty high assist numbers there. It's also interesting about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, where coming into last season, everyone had him as a lottery pick for that 2018 draft. And now, I mean, not a peep about this guy. I saw him, I think, on the Bleacher Report top prospects. He was at like 49th or 50th. I would not be surprised if he kind of is just a year late to fulfill on these, first round grades, top 20 grades or whatever, and he has a big breakout year. Seems like a lot of people have forgotten about him, and he's fallen off the map.
I mean, isn't that perfect though? If you're, this kind of reminds me of like I was Barstool Reegs today tweeted about how like who should he draft first in like a college basketball fantasy draft. I was like, well, I don't think you want a guy you're gonna have for 1 year. Like I would not draft Luke May because he's a senior. I wouldn't draft RJ Barrett because you're getting 1 year of him. Like the best way I think you can almost the best way you can recruit in college basketball is get guys who are like in that 50 to 75 range, maybe even like 25 to 50. You can get for 2, 3, 4 years, and they'll be good for those 4 years, like really good, like above average starter to all conference player. Like, would you rather have Justin Robinson's career for Virginia Tech, or would you rather have RJ Barrett for 1? I mean, RJ Barrett for 1 year will be more impactful, and perhaps getting the statement of getting RJ Barrett means more than just having RJ Barrett for that year, but just the physical player himself. I think you could argue the value of a Justin Robinson clearly higher.
No, absolutely. I mean, and we talk about the unexpected early entrants all the time, which I'm sure we'll get to with Wake Forest in a bit. But having guys who, getting guys who are as highly ranked as possible who are going to stay for 4 years is huge. I mean, Monte Morris comes to mind, who was like a top 75 guy who had a unbelievable career for Iowa State, kind of changed the trajectory of that program. He was one of their key pieces there for Fred Hoiberg and Steve Prohm. A guy who I think could fit that mold, just off the top of my head, over the next few years could be Matt Coleman for Texas, where he averaged double figures as a freshman as a starting point guard. Probably has 3 more years of starting point guard in him. Texas should be pretty good this year. And then depending on who returns, they could be really good next year. And then they have recruited surprisingly well, especially at the center position where they have like 4 top 100 recruits at that center spot. So, guys like that are certainly more valuable than they are given credit for.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Louisville later, and we won't talk too much about their 2019 class, but I think their 2019 class as a whole is like a perfect example of these like high-level recruits, but not necessarily like clear lottery picks that could stick around for a while and just like set the tone for the program.
That's what Texas A&M almost had, where they just were a year short on DJ Hogue and Tyler Davis, and then Robert Williams got too good too quick. But that could have been a really, and then JJ Caldwell obviously gets ineligible and then kicked out, right? So I mean that was a perfect core there. That it's hard to say it was a disappointment because Texas A&M went to I believe 2 Sweet 16s during their tenure, but they could have accomplished a little more. Yeah,
completely agree. Let's move on. This is kind of a great philosophical discussion, but given how many teams we got to get to, we should probably save it for another pod. At least any further discussion of it. Florida State, you're very high on them, Brad, so I'll kind of give the floor to you. This team goes to the Elite Eight last season, nearly beats Michigan in that game, and they bring back a lot with Phil Kofer and Terrence Mann. They lose C.J. Walker, but they get back Trent Forrest and M.J. Walker and Cabin Gelly. They also grab a grad transfer in David Nichols, who should help out. I mean, I'm starting to go cold on this team. I'm interested in your thoughts.
So I think the main difference as to why I'm higher on them than most is I think I value Trent Forrest a lot more than kind of the average predictor there. He was playing extremely well down the stretch, especially in the NCAA tournament. I think I watched a lot of Florida State games late, and he really caught my eye. He's not a shooter, but he's a really big versatile point guard who can create. And then I think MJ Walker, kind of in the similar vein to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, is due for a breakout year, where 5-star recruit. A lot of people had higher expectations, were a little disappointed when he was primarily used as a spot-up shooter. I think he could really break out. And then you know what you're getting from Terrence Mann and Phil Kofer there as seniors. But then I'm also really high on Kabengele, who I think is super underrated. I know that Christ Kumage is kind of like the nominal center, but Kabengele I think is really going to emerge as the true center and really make an impact. He can space the floor a little bit. He's very energetic, very athletic, blocks some shots. A really nice change of pace from the kind of tall, lumbering Kumage there.
Yeah, I completely agree on most of those points in terms of why you'd be higher. At least I understand the logic, if nothing else. I think it'll be interesting because losing Obiagu, it takes the opportunity for Leonard Hamilton to play as like gigantic center all the time, where he had Kumanji and Obiagu, and he could just always run out that lineup. And I think Kabengele is their best option at the 5, where they can go smaller. They can have Kofor at the 4, guys like Mann on the wing and MJ Walker, and just be super athletic and switchy. I think that's better than just playing these just absurdly tall human beings. But, I mean, that's kind of been the MO for Leonard Hamilton for quite some time. So that's definitely something I'll be watching shake out.
And then also just a guy that I didn't mention earlier, Pat Savoy. Between him and Nichols coming off the bench, you have a pair of seniors that can score, that can really shoot it. I think Nichols will fill that CJ Walker role perfectly. Kind of a smaller version as Forrest takes more of the point guard minutes. But with Kofor healthy, this team has a very strong top 8 that has a lot of veterans, but also has some younger guys who can break through and make a serious impact.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Savoy because he's never met a shot he doesn't like. That guy shoots 6 shots a game in 13 minutes last season. He shot 4 shots a game in 8 minutes as a freshman. I mean, that dude gets on the floor and he just chucks threes nonstop. Respect.
And then in terms of the composite, I have them the highest, obviously, at number 10. And then 3 people have them unranked. Kyle Kensing, the Buzz King, and Jeff Goodman. I don't see how you can have this team unranked. I mean, that's just absolutely absurd to me. And then the person with them at 11, which is the second highest, is Joe Nardone.
Yeah, I think they should probably be ranked. I don't think it's completely crazy not to.
Oh, it's a travesty.
Well, you're big on them though. So
yeah,
to you it's a travesty. Just like to me, it's a travesty that someone tweeted that Northwestern will be worse than Rutgers this season in basketball.
I didn't notice this, but I guess in Matt Norlander's 135 or is that 350 whatever rankings that he had Rutgers coming in 12th in the Big Ten. I didn't see who he had going 13th and 14th. But
there have been some people who who were like, oh, people should think Northwestern is worse than Rutgers this year, and like we shouldn't do this too much on the pod, but like right now, but like. I was like, Northwestern has 3 players definitively better than anyone on Rutgers. Law Pardon, Ryan Taylor, far better than Geo Baker. And like I just don't know how someone can like watch basketball and say that. It amazes me. I guess like when you're fans, you like especially notice the gaffes that like national media makes.
Oh yeah,
and that was just.
Absolutely.
I mean. I would disagree with that take if I wasn't like following Northwestern closely, but I'd be like, oh, like I guess you're just down on Northwestern. That's fine. But like whatever. I mean, with Bill Carmody's players, Chris Collins wasn't finishing below 10th in the Big Ten. It's crazy to me. He was like 6-12 in like a year with like Alex Ola getting big minutes. Anywho, let's go to Louisville. Rant over. Louisville has new life with Chris Mack after a really weird year with David Padgett at the helm because of the Patino stuff that I'm sure all of you are aware of. They lose Dengadell, Ray Spalding, Quentin Snyder, Anas Mahmoud. But the core of this team this year looks to be guys like VJ King, guys like Jordan Nwora, Ryan McMahon, Stephen Enoch, who reports were played very well in their game against Bellarmine, I believe, yesterday, that they handled the D2 team. It was close for much of the way. This team's probably a year away, but, I mean, Jordan Nwora is going to be fun. VJ King's going to be fun. And Chris Mack's a really good coach, and it'll be really interesting to see how these guys shake out right away.
Why do people think that this team's going to be good?
I guess literally just Chris Mack.
That just drives me crazy. How some people have this, being like a surefire top 25 team. I saw that the other day. Louisville is a surefire top 25 team. That's just absolutely. It's just crazy. I mean, in regards to Enoch, I mean, every year especially during his time at UConn, we heard about how he was going to break out, how he's doing this in practice. He did this in the U18s for Nigeria or Egypt, whatever team he played for. He put up crazy numbers. But this team is just missing a lot of star power. I guess you could argue VJ King or Jordan Nwora takes a big leap. But even so, I mean, you have like a patched together backcourt with Cunningham and Quan Four. And then even so, you need a big jump from Darius Perry. I just don't see how this is anywhere close to a top 25 team or even an NCAA tournament team. I have, in my opinion, generously ranked them as like a 4 or 5 seed in the NIT sort of team.
Right. I guess what is the scenario that it would take for you to say, like, if I told you all of these things were to happen, would you say they're an NCAA tournament team? Jordan Nwora can be like a 15-point-a-game guy at reasonable efficiency, solid point guard play, like almost league average point guard play from Cunningham and Darius Perry. Front court gets you rebounds enough to not get crushed on the glass. VJ King is good, but not great. I think that's like a reasonable outcome. Is that an NCAA tournament team outcome? It might be. It might be enough to like at least be on the bubble.
Yeah, I think, when comparing it to other bubble teams, say like a Butler, which is my last team in, this Louisville team doesn't have anyone as close to as good as Kamar Baldwin. But if a VJ King and a Jordan Nwora are going to go into that 15-point per game range, maybe now now they have comparable talent maybe, but I think Butler is deeper. I think they're certainly more experienced. Point guard play is kind of a wash, but I think Butler's shooters are probably better. Guys like Sean McDermott and Paul Jorgensen there, and they have some solid options coming off the bench like a Henry Badley. The front courts are pretty comparable too. So maybe Louisville isn't that far behind from being the last team in, let's say. But I think that the difference between like Louisville and Texas or Louisville and Indiana, I think, is a lot greater and a lot more unlikely to it's more unlikely to make a scenario where they can be as good as an Indiana or Texas. Yeah,
I completely agree. Does anyone have them in the closet, like, legitimately?
Definitely. Let me just find them out now. But
they shouldn't be. Let's just kind of put that out there.
So I mean, this is kind of a bad way to frame it, but they come in 39th in the composite, which is not super accurate because people are only ranking 25 teams. But let me just kind of bring up who is ranking Louisville so I can.
Can I guess that Aaron Torres did it?
All right, so the highest that they are is 23. All right, so only 2 people have them ranked. And at 23 is your man, Aaron Torres. And then at 25, sorry. Aaron Torres has him at 25. And then at 23 is Shelby Mast.
Okay. Yeah.
Unexcusable.
Yeah. It's just wrong. That's fine. It's the wrong opinion. Notre Dame, let's move on to them. The Fighting Irish, it's a new look team. Lose Bonzi Colson, lose your point guard in Matt Farrell. Temple Gibbs is still back. They bring in Juwan Durham from UConn, and a really good freshman class features guys like Nate Lazuski, guys like Prentice Hub, and then they'll return guys like Rex Pfluger, and then DJ Harvey's kind of the X factor here. Was a really good recruit out of high school, was hurt much of last season, got microfracture surgery. It looks like he's going to play early in the season. Question is how effective. I mean, microfracture is a very serious type of surgery. It's not just your typical meniscus tear or something like that. So this is definitely something to monitor, but it's a top 15 recruiting class for Mike Bray. I think long-term you have to love it. It's just a question of, do they have enough this year to get back to the big dance?
Yeah, because Mike Bray is usually a guy who kind of runs with the vets. He's very good at developing players. So they have guys like a Matt Farrell who they don't even play as freshmen, and then by the time they're seniors and juniors, they're making a serious impact. Even a guy like Demetrius Jackson played a lot as a freshman, but he wasn't a major impact player. But I think this year that two of their freshmen, Nate Lazuski and Prentice Hub, are going to play more than the Notre Dame freshmen normally play. Like guys like Steve Vistoria and Beecham were in the rotation, playing, I don't know, off the top of my head, but I want to say 12 to 15 minutes a game. I think Hub and Lazuski could exceed that 20-minute per game mark and be key pieces as freshmen. Having said that, I still think that this team is kind of a year away. I think that's appropriate to say, especially if Temple Gibbs returns for the senior year. This could be a really good team. But I currently have Notre Dame right outside the field as like a 1 or a 2 seed in the NIT.
Yeah, I mean, it should probably be a top 25 team next year if everybody comes back. I mean, it's hard to say because you don't know what the freshmen look like. Like, in theory, they'd have the makings. I mean, if DJ Harvey is what I think he can be if he's healthy, this team could very much be an NCAA tournament team. But for me, I don't think you can project it preseason.
Yeah, and then another guy who's been very injury prone, Juwan Durham, obviously very high upside, showed very little at UConn. Injuries could have been a factor, but he is the ultimate wild card for this team because he could be a great fit at that center spot and really kind of elevate Notre Dame. But I think it's more likely he's like a reserve playing, I don't know, 12 to 15 minutes a game.
It'll be interesting because Elijah Burns was named a captain. He didn't really play much his first few seasons. Sometimes it's an indication if a guy gets named the captain, they're going to play a fair amount. So I mean, he's interesting. He's pretty athletic. Kind of play the 4 or the 5. They already have John Mooney, guys like, and they also have Nick Jogo. So I mean, like, it'll be interesting to see how much of a youth movement this team goes through. I think my gut feel right now says they don't go through as much of one this season as I think a lot of fans from the outside are expecting.
Yeah, I think that the vets probably start. I think Gibbs, Pfluger, Harvey, Mooney, Burns, and then Lazuski and Hub play a ton off the bench. Then Durham's there, and then who gets number 9, whether it be a vet like Jogo or like a Robbie Carmody who can space the floor from that 2 spot.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see. They're going to be a team that I'm going to watch a lot in their first few games and like get a feel for them. And then I should make a list actually of those teams I like really need to get a feel for because I just don't know what they're going to look like, and just like make a note of that. So that's the topic for so that's something I should do after I finish recording this podcast. So let's get it moving to Syracuse, a team that we did a deep dive on earlier in the offseason, a team that I've kind of continued to label the same concern all year, and that is their offense last year was Tyus Battle, O'Shea Brissett, and Frank Howard just kind of chucking. And that didn't work that great. I mean, they were very inefficient. It was just enough to ride their defense to the NCAA tournament. Now you add a guy like Elijah Hughes, who was very good in their D2 exhibition against St. Rose. You add a guy like Jalen Carey who could score the basketball. You even add Buddy Boeheim, who can really shoot the ball. Does it up this team's offense to the next level? If it does, I think this is a top 25 team. This is a team that can compete for the Sweet 16, make a deep run. And if not, I think this team just kind of stagnates. And until we know that, until we see it, it's going to be hard for me to bet on them being a top 25 team because I think there will be offensive flaws even if those guys step up. But at the same time, I'm much more open to the idea of Elijah Hughes, Jalen Carey, and Buddy Boeheim changing this team than I was in April.
Yeah, I think that they will change it enough for Syracuse to be a top 20 team. I don't think that they're going to be, like all league players or anything. I think that they'll come off the bench and they'll play a consistent and important role and give Syracuse more guys who can handle the ball and more guys who can put the ball in the basket without kind of sacrificing their defense too much. I love Pascal Chukwu. I think he was super underrated, just the way he alters shots and just controls the middle of that zone. Then Mark Dolezaj was a guy who was playing extremely well during Syracuse's postseason push. He's someone who, as he starts playing with more confidence and kind of emerged from a glue player to more of a kind of a offensive threat, or at least someone who you need to account for. I have the Orange 7th in the conference, and I think 17th or 18th nationally.
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, I'm as I said, I'm definitely talking myself into this one. I think the defense is going to be great, as you said. I mean, I do love Chukwu as well. I think he's very underrated because, I mean, it's tough to properly rate a player who averages 5.5 points a game. I mean, people who don't watch college basketball don't realize that guys who score 5.5 points a game can still be like outstanding players. And until, people, I mean, they'll always be underrated for that. And I think Dolezaj is going to be good. They just need depth, and I think they'll have that depth. We'll see if they wind up getting good play out of those guys.
In terms of the composite, Syracuse comes in at number 19, which I think is very fair. In terms of highs and lows, highest for Syracuse is 10. Oh my goodness, that is too high. Some people have them unranked, which I don't agree with. But 10th, Kyle Kensing. 13th, which is the second highest, Andy Katz. And then in terms of the unranked people, Kevin's first go around had them unranked, and then Joe Nardone and Shelby Mass had them unranked. I think you got to rank the Orange here.
Yeah, I don't hate ranking them. I'm not like huge on it, but I'm also not like thoroughly against it at this point. I've kind of talked myself into it. Let's move it on.
One more thing before we move on is that Notre Dame has actually had top 25 votes. Unbelievable, but actually single vote. Jeff Goodman has him 23rd.
Yeah,
that's too high.
Although Jeff has been high on like Lazewski. Jeff has been high on. I think he tweeted something about Prentice Hub, where like. If like I don't mind saying Notre Dame's a top 25 team if you believe like Juwan Durham's going to be terrific, Lazewski's like a starting caliber player right away, Temple Gibbs is outstanding, Mike Bray's a great coach. Like you can talk me into it. I would disagree preseason, but you could talk me into that talent.
Yeah, it's not like they're ranking Louisville or anything, but I think that this is more of a bubble team. Just in terms of the composite in general. There's 48 different teams ranked, and that's the number. Probably like team number 48 is probably going to be the last team in the tournament, either 48 or 49, depending how good Loyola is going to be. So that kind of shows that even if a team is getting a vote or two in the preseason top 25, they could still be kind of seen or kind of fall into that bubble or even NIT range.
Yeah, that's like really fair. I mean, it's gonna be really fascinating. I think to see how many of these like top 25 teams, how many like every year there's a few teams that like surprise us. Like who would be a team, Brad, who like no one's ranking right now, who you would be like I could see making the top 25 this season?
Maybe San Diego State.
I was thinking Western Kentucky, but yeah, I mean probably mid-major.
You have a team that rattles off a couple nice wins in the non-conference and then just has smooth sailing the rest of the way. Maybe takes a loss here or there, but it's much harder to get out of the 25 when you're in it than it is to break in. So like a team like San Diego State, if they I don't have their non-conference off the top of my head, but they are playing in Maui. Maybe they pull an upset in Maui. Start to generate some buzz. Have one or two losses in the non-conference, get ranked at like 19th or something. And then as they continue to win against inferior competition, they rise up the rankings. And if they suffer a bad loss, maybe they get to 11th, they suffer a bad loss, they fall to 18th, right? Where normally that loss would take them out of the top 25. You can just win. You can get so much quantity of wins that it's almost impossible for you to fall out.
Yeah, no, that's like a very good point that I think a lot of people kind of miss. It is super valuable to be in the preseason top 25. I think perception is everything, and if you're perceived good early, it takes a long time to convince people you're bad. Like it took a long time for
Arizona State was in the top 25 like 3 weeks too long last year.
Even like Northwestern fell out of the 25 for losing to Creighton early in the year, but like people still believed they were good until like they lost to Indiana and scored 44 points on like Martin Luther King Day. Like they kept losing games and people were like, but Northwestern's good, right? People just didn't get it, Because they started that season in the top 25, there was just this belief. I think that could happen like a Florida State this year. Like you believe in them, but if Florida State were to just start losing because they're starting high, or Kansas State, same way. Kansas State could underwhelm this season because they started high, not fall as far as they should.
Yeah, I think that Kansas State could make the Seton Hall of this year, where they don't live up to like the top 12 aspirations, but they're still probably a top 25 team, but they're just like kind of floating in and out of the top 25, but not kind of make the jump that everyone anticipated.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's end this rant. Let's move on to Boston College, because we still have a few more teams to get to on this podcast. BC unable to continue to build momentum. We've talked a lot about these early entries killing teams and losing a guy 1 year early. That certainly happened with Jerome Robinson. They also lost Deontay Hawkins. I guess not really early. He got injured early in the season and now is not returning for his 6th year of college, which is hard to blame him, but he would have gotten the waiver to do it if he'd wanted to. So that certainly takes a little bit of wind out of Boston College's sails. I still think they'll be okay. The problem Jim Christian had was he took too many guys who weren't ACC players because he needed to fill spots. And so he wound up year over year with a lot of guys who were just dead roster weight. Like everyone after Deontay Hawkins on their roster sheet last season, in terms of like the stat sheet you'd find on Sports Reference, was pretty much dead weight. Like Vin Baker, Lucas Kraljevic, Giancarlo Reyes, Avery Wilson. This is all just pretty much dead weight on this roster. And he's gradually turning that around, getting in Winston Tabbs, getting in Chris Herron, getting in Jarius Hamilton, all for this class. If that's the best class he's had, you start to build some depth. Jordan Chapman will be back with Kai Bowman. Popovich is good. Stephen Mitchell can play. I think Stephen Mitchell is really underrated. Where they could start to have a 7-man team that's pretty good. Now, is it enough without Jerome Robinson to make the NCAA tournament? I don't think so. But it's enough to be an NIT team, maybe finish over 500 again, maybe even get to 500 in the ACC. I wouldn't rule it out, So I'll say I'm a little higher on Boston College's chances than most are.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it for Boston College. They have a great player in Kai Bowman, and Winston Tabbs looks like he's going to be a surprising freshman. But I don't really love like Mitchell's like a good role player, right? But he's going to be the starting power forward. I think he's more of like a reserve type of player. Kind of the same thing with the Jordan Chapman, where he's probably going to be the second leading scorer on this team. Even though I think he's more of like a complementary piece. And then you mentioned the dead weight point, and that's just the perfect example where this team should be getting sit-out transfers. A few years ago, I think it may have even been Christian's first or second year. They took 2 grad transfers. This guy Connor Tavey, and then I think Maurice Jeffries was his name, like a grad transfer from Delaware. And there's no reason that a rebuilding team should take a grad transfer. The difference between the grad transfers and playing a freshman there and having a sit-out transfer is literally nothing. I mean, you go from 15th place to 15th place. But if you can kind of take some chances on some sit-out guys, maybe get some talented second-chance guys, maybe some mid-major standouts, kind of like what Clemson did, kind of elevate their status. That's how you build. Or like how Nevada has become this this Final Four contender all of a sudden. target the transfers instead of grabbing guys who have no shot at ever playing in the ACC.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. And I think grad transfers to build it's weird. I mean, I think grad transfers are you're bringing in you're bringing in a grad transfer because you're worried about getting fired and you need guys to kind of buoy your roster. But at the same time, like for the long-term health of the program, I completely agree. And that's kind of the challenge of when you have a coach who's kind of on the hot seat coaching is they make wrong roster decisions because they're worried because they're worried about losing their job. They'll grab a late, like Mark Turgeon grabbing Ricky Lindo instead of a sit-out transfer is a mistake. Unless you think Ricky Lindo is going to be better than Zane Martin if they could have gotten Zane Martin or like a similar level transfer that they could have been in the mix with. Like that's a mistake. But he has to do it because he's worried he's going to get fired if he doesn't have that one extra piece. And so I think that's one of the fascinating things about having a coach on the hot seat, which is what Jim Christian's been doing the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm going to track this year. I have a list of all guys who I've deemed a late stock riser where they did not have more than one high major offer from before January 1st, right? So there's a list of maybe like 25 or 30 guys, guys who ended up on a high major team, a guy like a Trace Ramsey, right, for Maryland. I compiled a list of like 30 or so guys, high major plus AAC and A10. I'm going to compare the performance of those guys to some sit-out transfers, some mid-major role players that kind of took a jump. Because I think that it's better to take a guy who averaged like 5 points a game in the MAC than it is to kind of grab one of these late stock risers. I think that in most cases it's going to turn out that the mid-major role player who's played minutes and has made a rotation, maybe even a starting lineup on a mid or low major team is going to be preferable and a better roster move. But in terms of making moves to save your job, I hope Jim Christian didn't think that Connor Tavey and Maurice Jeffers was going to be the difference between like NCAA tournament and coming in 15th. It seemed to me like I don't like my starting 4-man and my starting 5-man. I want an upgrade, as opposed to saying, we're not going to win this year. I'll take the hit at the 4 and the 5 this year. Maybe I like some of these freshmen, to kind of cut their teeth this year, and then I'm going to bring in some transfers to challenge them and maybe even play over them when the transfer is eligible in the next season.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's both. I think it's a mix of both, but yeah, it's definitely a fair point. Connor Tavey was fun. I liked him. He was good.
Me too.
I have BC at 12. Where do you have him, Brad?
1 sec. I think I have him at 13, but I'll just double check. Yep, 13.
Which means you have one of the bottom 3 in mind: Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and Pittsburgh ahead of them. Which one is that, Brad? Before we get into those final 3 teams,
Wake Forest.
Okay.
But I have all. Basically, I have a bottom 4 tier, whereas most people have the bottom 3 tier. Because I have Wake Forest sub 100 as well.
Fair. All right. I think they're better. I think BC's better than 100, but it's not crazy. I don't think at all. Let's move on to Georgia Tech. Josh Okogie, Ben Lammers, Tadrick Jackson all gone. This team just does not have firepower. Jose Alvarado's there. They bring in Mike DeVoe, who's a top 75 freshman from New York. It's just he hasn't recruited at a consistently high enough level to Josh Pastner hasn't to really compete. And I mean, especially when you're not recruiting Georgia. I mean, his best 2 kids the last 2 years, Alvarado and DeVoe, are New York City kids. I don't think you can continue to win at Georgia Tech not recruiting the Southeast. I mean, Shembari Phillips was a pretty good recruit out of high school, went to Tennessee, transferred down to Georgia Tech. Maybe he helps a little bit. James Banks was working on a waiver. Maybe he helps if he can play. It's just they don't have a lot of dudes who can put the ball in the basket.
Yeah, I think Banks was a really nice addition. Even if you sit out the year, that's the perfect type of gamble that you need to take on a transfer if you're gonna make a jump in a league like the ACC where it's very tough to climb out of the bottom. And I think that this future backcourt of Alvarado and Mike DeVoe has them set up pretty well. I just think that they're going to probably struggle this year. They're kind of missing a guy like a Josh Okogie, like a go-to scorer, especially on the wing. They have a few interesting guys in the front court, guys like Moses Wright, Evan Cole, and Christian Skoland, who can, they can shoot a little bit. They're pretty athletic. Cole was a guy who had a lot of buzz coming in after he decommitted from Kevin Keats when Keats left UNC Wilmington, and he had a lot of high major buzz after that decommitment. He was, I think, okay as a freshman, but we'll see if one of these front court pieces can make a jump and kind of jumpstart this rebuild.
Yeah, you just feel like they need 2 or 3 breaks to go their way, or else Josh Pastner is going to sit on the hot seat pretty sooner rather than later. Anything else on Georgia Tech before I move on to Wake Forest?
No, I have them 14th, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's where I am as well. Wake Forest, once again, crippled by early departures. Doral Moore gone from the program. Keyshawn Woods gone from the program. And they bring in a really good recruiting class. Jalen Horde, Isaiah Musius, both guys are very talented, but they could be in a position where once again they lose guys early. If Horde or Musius leaves early for the draft, Danny Manning 2 years ago was sitting pretty with John Collins and Bryant Crawford and Keyshawn Woods and Doral Moore and all these guys, and he signs Jalen Horde and Isaiah Musius, and all of a sudden a year later, Wake Forest looks kind of screwed.
Yeah, they went from being in great shape to being in a lot of trouble, and it's all about that early entry where they lose Dinos Middleglue, very late, and then after last season, which was extremely disappointing, they lose Doral Moore and Brian Crawford before their senior years, and then Keyshawn Woods is a grad transfer. I mean, that's four starters right there that you just lost it in a blink of an eye, not even including John Collins. And then after this year, Jalen Horde, even though he's a top 30 guy, he's had a lot of NBA draft buzz. Even a guy like Olivier Sarr, who was a little disappointing as a freshman, he's pretty highly regarded in terms of his kind of future prospects. And this is another team. The roster is kind of similar to Boston College in the sense that they're throwing a lot of darts with these freshmen. The freshmen are higher rated than Boston College's freshmen, so there's a higher chance of them, paying off. But this roster does seem, like if Moore and Crawford were back, that this would be a NCAA tournament team at least in the bubble. Like if this was a Crawford, Brandon Childress, Sean D. Brown, Jalen Horde, and Doral Moore lineup.
Yeah, they'd be dangerous if they could have brought those guys back. But and I guess my question to you, Brad, do you blame at all Danny Manning for losing these guys early? Do you think there's something about the way he's coaching? Or do you think it's literally just like guys have better opportunities?
I think it's just bad luck. I mean, the Keyshawn Woods thing, that could be, all right, I have 1 year left. After Moore and Crawford are probably going to leave, this team's not going to have much. I'm going to go to a better team. And then it's hard to blame Crawford and Moore, who are both fringe NBA enough to get summer league and I think even training camp invites. So they were good enough. I think the blame on Danny Manning has to be for squandering the talent in a recent years, especially last year. I think they lost like three bye games in like the first week of the season or something crazy. So the recruiting is still going well. He just needs a couple of these guys to break through and finally generate some wins.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just it's tough when you lose guys like this, and I hope for Danny Manning's sake, he can keep these guys and at least have a chance with Horde and UCS to build and see if he can put together another 19 class that's good. I know they were in on a few really good prospects. They got an official from I think Trace Jackson Davis. They got one from Cole. They're in on Cole Anthony, although I don't think they're going to get him. But they're in with a lot of good kids, so maybe they could build something. Just a reminder how quickly things can swing in high major basketball.
And it'll be interesting to watch. One thing I mentioned a little bit earlier about taking these mid-major role players as opposed to a freshman flyer who's like a late stock riser. We'll need to watch how Ikena Smart plays, the former Buffalo big man who should now see some minutes as that backup center. We'll see if that's preferable than grabbing a former mid-major type recruit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really just more of a lottery ticket if you're going to get the mid-major type recruit, where it's like, I know Akema Smart isn't going to be that good, but he's a big body. He'll give you fouls and minutes. Whereas like that freshman might not play this year, but they might give you something long-term. So it'll be interesting. But I think Smart doesn't really move the needle for me, at least.
No, I mean, a team like Wake Forest, like I mentioned with Boston College, should be going with the sit-out transfer. They got Andrew and White at the 2. They should have gotten one for their 5 spot as opposed to this 1-year grad transfer in a potential rebuilding year.
Yeah, they could have grabbed like a James Banks would have been like an interesting fit. Like same idea. All right, let's wrap this thing up with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to be bad this year, but they at least have some direction now with Jeff Capel. Jeff Capel brings in a few late high-stock freshmen in Trey McGowan, who reclassifies, Xavier Johnson, who was a Nebraska commit, and then Audice Tony. I just totally mispronounced his name, but that's all right. They also bring back guys like Jared Wilson-Frame, Shamil Stevenson, lost those 2 guards in Parker Stewart and Marcus Carr. That hurts, but they'll get Terrell Brown, who's an interesting back. They'll get Malik Ellison, who was at St. John's, who sat out last year. He wound up staying with the program. So not in quite as bad a shape as they were, but, I mean, this roster just had no talent last year, and I just can't imagine them winning many games.
Yeah, they've certainly upgraded their talent. It obviously would have been better if Stewart and Carr stayed, and you could kind of build with that core, who would have been very experienced. But I mean, Wilson Frame's pretty good. Ellison's a good player. City Indeer is an interesting guy who's had a lot of injuries, but he's a former guy who's had a lot of NBA buzz back when he was a younger player. I think he was a former Texas A&M commit who ended up playing at New Mexico State. And then the point guard play could be rough as they're leaning on 2 borderline top 100 freshmen, Trey McGowan and Xavier Johnson, will both be, probably very good players in time, especially McGowan. He's someone who I really like. But that type of recruit on this type of roster, probably not going to go great in terms of wins, but Pitt should be better. I bet that they win at least 1 game in the ACC, but
I'll go further and say they win 2.
Oh my goodness. Don't get ahead of yourself there, but
Pitt rising, baby. Pitt rising.
Their center position is where they're really lacking, I think. But it's another team. Why no sit-out transfers?
They tried on Kalia Jones.
Yeah, that's true. But
they also went for Deshaun Burke. Couldn't get him.
You got to go one step lower then and get the like the Anthony Tarkis who went to UTEP or guys.
Yeah, I would have taken a guy like Anthony Tark over maybe like City and Deer. Like I don't think City and Deer moves the needle enough in 1 year to not take like 2 years of a 6'6" athletic wing and Anthony Tark.
Yeah, like a lot of these former high major guys that had to go mid major too.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's run through the standings we had real quick just to give you guys a refresher. I had Virginia 1, Duke 2, North Carolina at 3, Virginia Tech at 4, Florida State 5, Syracuse at 6, Clemson at 7, North Carolina State at 8. That may change. Miami at 9, Notre Dame at 10, Louisville at 11, Boston College at 12, Wake Forest 13, Georgia Tech 14, Pittsburgh at 15. I had those first 8 teams making the NCAA tournament, Miami, Notre Dame, and Louisville all possibly in the mix if things break right. BC kind of beginning a tier of guys, the teams that are really not likely to be in the mix, and then Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and Pitt, I would be pretty floored if they are.
Yep, so I have Virginia 1, Duke 2, then UNC 3, Florida State 4, Virginia Tech 5, NC State 6, Syracuse 7, Clemson 8. Those are my NCAA tournament teams and all in the top 25. Then Notre Dame 9, Louisville 10, Miami 11, all 3 in the NIT. And then my bottom 4, which I have sub 100 of Wake, Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Pittsburgh.
Completely, yeah. We have very little actual variance in there. We have a couple spot differences in the middle pack, but we overall agree on the team, on the team's kind of general tiering.
First team all conference. I have Luke May, RJ Barrett, Kai Bowman, Justin Robinson, and then tough call for last spot between DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome. I'm tentatively going with DeAndre Hunter here.
Yeah, and my first team was Bowman, Hunter, May, Barrett, and Williamson, with the player of the year being Barrett.
You have Zion, I have Justin Robinson. That's the only difference?
Yeah.
I think you could also go for Marquise Reed there. I mean, if you're a Tyus Battle guy, which there seems to be a lot of Tyus Battle supporters out there, he's really not that good. I mean, he's a borderline second round pick at best in terms of NBA draft stock. But you could go Tyus Battle. If you have Notre Dame in the top 25, you better have Temple Gibbs on there. And then I think Terrence Mann is also a pretty reasonable pick.
Naz Little should be in the mix.
Yep. Naz Little as well.
Even Kenny Williams.
I think I would go Cam Johnson over Kenny Williams.
Really? I'm a Kenny Williams over Cam Johnson guy.
I think that they're both going to average double figures.
Yeah, I do too. I just think Kenny's a better creator. I think Cam's more of a shooter.
Did Williams create a lot last year? I seem to remember him more as a shooter than a creator.
I mean,
as well.
I think they're both like primary shooters. I think he attacks Williams attacks closeouts a little better. Can like do a little bit more off the bounce than Cam Johnson. I mean, they definitely neither of them did really any initiation because Pinson and Barry did all of that. But yeah. I thought Williams did a better job getting his own shot than Johnson did of the sample I saw.
Do you have like a underrated player and a breakout player?
My breakout player was in Nwora. I think that was kind of the only that was the clearest one to me.
For my breakout, I'll go with Trent Forrest. Fully getting that starting point guard role. Even if he doesn't have a huge increase in stats, I think he's going to really emerge as like a top 25 point guard in college basketball, become more of a household name.
I'm excited to see him play as well. I think he's gonna be really good. Anything else before we wrap up this show?
Nope. So we only have Big East left, which we'll do later this week.
Yes, we will try to do later this week. It is we will definitely get it to you at some point before the season starts. But yeah, I mean, please continue to check out the pod. Continue to check out our articles over in several different places now. Mine on my website. Brad's got them over at Rush the Court, over at southeasthoops.com, over at Busting Brackets. We're a week away by the time you listen to this podcast from real college basketball. I've got a Northwestern game to go to on Friday night against the D2. I could not be more excited about it. I'll be one of the first media members to enter Welsh Ryan Arena after its renovations. That should be cool. Very excited about the possibilities of seeing the new Welsh Ryan. I cannot wait to see this team in action. I can't wait to watch college basketball on Tuesday night. Brad, I know you've seen 2 games so far. Any quick hot takes on Providence before we jump off this pod?
Well, David Duke is going to be the starting point guard, like without a doubt. Emmett Holt looks fine. I mean, that's the people who are more down on Providence say, well, I don't think Emmett Holt's going to be healthy, or like, well, we need to see. But he looked the same to me. He's a little smaller in terms of like bulk, but he didn't look noticeably worse or anything than I remember him in terms of his play. And then Nate Watson can score still, doesn't do much of the rebounding. Alpha Diallo has been the best player, but not super surprising there.
There you have it, folks. Providence, I mean, has your opinion of the team overall changed much by seeing them twice?
No, it's just Cooley's got to stop with this 10, 11-man rotation. Hopefully this is only a preseason thing. But when they play their top, like 5 of their top 7 together, good. But when they get into these guys at the end of the bench, guys like Drew Edwards, Malik White was brutal the other night, Khalif Young, I mean, he's got to cut down on the minutes. I mean, seriously, enough's enough.
Yeah, I get it. I'll probably have some more hot takes once I see Northwestern in action. Cannot wait for that. Cannot wait for college basketball. Thanks so much for listening. We will come to you with a Big East preview as soon as we possibly can. Tentatively scheduled for Thursday night. We will record that one. We will see what happens, though, because college basketball is an interesting time of year. College life for me is an interesting time of year, and I'm sure Brad gets busy, so I will sign off from this show. Hopefully we'll get that Big East preview out to you ASAP. But we really appreciate you all listening, and hope you have a great night.